I'm talking about Srila Prabhupada in front of Srila Prabhupada, which is like really nerve-wracking right now. So, and of course we've got a lot of seniors here as well. So like I said at the beginning, I'm just simply repeating. Like I mentioned, I'm not a Mahabhagavat self-realized devotee yet. I'm still working on it myself. But I'm literally just taking the knowledge that I've gathered from different exalted personalities like Radhanath Maharaj, what I've understood from about Srila Prabhupada over the years, things that I've also gathered recently from Keshav Maharaj and Marendra Prabhu, and just trying to give a composite picture of Srila Prabhupada's background. And then over the next few days, there'll be further seminars looking at his legacy, the lessons we can implement from his life in our life as well. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai! Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai! Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachaline Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatyadeshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhishcha kripa sindhuvyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. These prayers that we just recited, I did the short version obviously due to time, but these actually are known as the Prabhupada Pranam mantras, and they're actually in glorification of Srila Prabhupada. Does anyone know who composed them? It's actually, so Srila Prabhupada himself actually composed them. The reason is because there was no one at that time qualified to compose those prayers. So he actually did it himself for the benefit of his disciples. And you'll notice in the last bit, the second stanza, it says, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Taline. So in other words, like he would go to the Western countries, Paschatyadesh, and destroy the culture of impersonalism and, like irreligion and spirituality and Mayavad philosophy and all these kind of things. And at that time, the disciples actually said, but Srila Prabhupada shouldn't be Sarvadesh Tarine instead of Paschatyadesh Tarine. Like all countries, you are going not just in the Western countries, all over the world. And Srila Prabhupada's humility was right there actually demonstrated because he said that no. Because the disciples said, what about India? You've done so much in India. He goes, no. My Guru Maharaj had already put in the plants of Vaishnavism in India already. That's Srila Prabhupada's Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. So I'm not going to take credit for that or anything like that. My focus was on the Western countries. So that's why he kept it like that. So I thought it's interesting that, they actually mentioned that. Okay, so I guess I'll go in some sort of chronological order, but I'm going to just start with a certain aspect here. So 17th September 1965, Srila Prabhupada, he set foot on Western soil, United States of America, okay? And actually, along with him, it's not just Srila Prabhupada set foot, along with Srila Prabhupada, through him, the 6 Goswamis, the Acharyas, they all set foot in America because he's a transparent via medium. Because of his presence, the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy was able to take root in the West. And it's growing, and it will grow more and more. What we're seeing now is just the beginning of the Krishna conscious movement, right? It will obviously become more and more. But just in his own lifetime, he established 108 temples, book distribution, prasadam temples. Don't worry if it's not working, I'll just talk. Yeah. Okay. All these kind of things. He did amazing things. Let's now go back a bit, before Prabhupada did these wonderful things, and let's go to the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. So, has everyone here heard of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj? Yeah. He's Srila Prabhupada's guru. So, in the Krishna conscious movement, we follow what is called a guru parampara. In other words, for us to kind of like develop our Krishna consciousness, there is going to be a certain time in your lives where you're going to have to take shelter of a bona fide authorized guru. This is not just even in our movement, in other spiritual traditions, you'll have this system of guru-disciple. Anyone who says that I can do spirituality, I can become self-enlightened just by my own efforts, actually is not actually correct. It's not true. You can't do that. You need the help of a guru. It's said that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj is compared to the moon. So we live in an age right now in Vedic culture, in Vedic system called Kali Yuga. Has anyone heard of Kali Yuga? This age is a dark age. We see that in the world around us. All the social, political disturbances, corruption, degradation. Just switch on the news, isn't it? It's all there, right? Or maybe just in your own living room. So anyway, it's all there. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj is described as a moon that's illuminating the dark sky of Kali Yuga. But along with the moon, he brings with him many twinkling stars, bright shining stars. And so these are also helping to illuminate the sky, okay? And they're here to give bhakti. They're here to give us devotion that's going to help us connect with Krishna in this age of Kali Yuga. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj is very emphatic that it's bhakti that we're giving. And that us as representatives of the Krishna conscious movements, we are here simply carriers of Vaishnavism. Just like, I don't know if you've seen that picture of, baby Krishna carrying Nanda Maharaj's shoe on his head to give it to him. You know, you've seen that in Krishna Lila books, like a baby, you know, giving the shoe on his head. So similarly, we are simply carrying the shoes of the great Vaishnavas before us and to deliver that to the world. Bhaktivinoda Maharaj said that I respect and I give my obeisances to all the Gyanis out there. The Gyanis are those yogis who become expert in knowledge. And I give my obeisances to all the karmis in this world. These are those people who become expert in materialistic activities and fruitive results. But he said that our knowledge, we are not into knowledge. We're not into material success. We're not even into mystic powers. We're not even into materialistic achievements. Our main success is dependence on the fortune of serving the Vaishnavas, right? So that's our success. Sometimes our Gauranga Prabhu actually recently said in our retreat that sometimes as bhakti yogis, devotional yogis, we're actually karmi yogis in the clothes of bhakti yogis. Because we actually, even in Krishna consciousness, we become achievement orientated. Actually, we should be blessings orientated. Okay, so this is just setting the mood of what it is that we're trying to do here in this Krishna conscious movement. But yeah, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, he came in the mood of the 6 Goswamis and his own father and guru, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, he actually, the 6 Goswamis, they had a few things that they did back in the day. For those of you who don't know 6 Goswamis, this is medieval times. After Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had 6 key disciples called the 6 Goswamis that did a few things. Number 1, Shastra Vichar, which means that they deliberated on the philosophy. They dissected the knowledge to give it to others, the Krishna conscious philosophy. Krishna consciousness has a lot of aspects to it. There's a social aspect, like everyone coming to the temple, making friends, it's all good, having some prasadam, dancing in kirtans, wonderful. But there's also the deep philosophy, the knowledge, the understanding that comes with it. He also said, Vrajera Nirgur Bhakta Karile Prachar, distributing this knowledge to other people, right? Re-establishing the books, the temples, the personal standards, the culture of what it means to be a Vaishnav. And of course, excavating the lost places. Everyone here has heard of Vrindavan, I'm guessing, right? And everyone knows Vrindavan means Krishna, right? Even if you're not into Krishna consciousness, everyone knows. In India, if you ask anyone, they'll know what Vrindavan, oh yeah, of course, Vrindavan means Krishna. They have like TV serials and, films and everything based on, Krishna in Vrindavan. Did you know that if it wasn't for the Goswamis, that would not be known? Most people don't know who the Goswamis are. If I was to ask most of you, what are the names of the 6 Goswamis? You'd be like, I don't know. Most of us, right? But actually, it's because of them and what they did in Vrindavan that we are now benefiting from what this Krishna knowledge and Krishna understanding and going to other places. You go to Vrindavan, you go on tours, on parikramas, and they tell you, oh, this is where Krishna did this, and this is where Krishna had a fight with this demon, and Krishna had this interaction and conversation with this personality. It's actually because of the Goswamis that this happened as well. Okay, what the 6 Goswamis did in Vrindavan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur did in Navadvip. So now you're thinking, okay, I'm coming up with lots of names there. Who is Bhaktivinoda Thakur? Okay, you got Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's guru is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, right? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's father was also a great guru in our movement. His name was Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So just like hundreds of years ago, 500 years ago roughly, what the 6 Goswamis did in Vrindavan, establishing the Vaishnava books, establishing the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur did the same thing in Navadvip. Navadvip is where the latest incarnation of Krishna appeared. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone's heard of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? So same thing. He established the place where he was born, Yoga Pit. He established books and songs and further publications of what it means to be Vaishnav. Okay, so following on from his father, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he carried the same mood of developing Vaishnavism for the next generation. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's father, he had an ability as well. He had the ability to pray and bring forth different personalities to help him in his mission. So in that mood, he actually prayed for Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj to come from the spiritual world to help him to develop this Krishna conscious movement in the 1800s. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur appeared, Prabhupada's guru. So you can see the chronology, right? I'm going before Prabhupada's coming on the scene. Right? I'm just setting the scene here. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came as the moon, and with him came all his twinkling stars. These stars themselves are amazing disciples. For example, Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, like self-realized Acharya. He was in Samadhi, right? Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. For those of you, as the years go by, you'll get to know more about the Krishna conscious history. These people are legends. Like, now they're just names, but as you'll know the history more and more, you'll find out, oh, these are some real big personalities here. Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. Remember that name. Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj will come very soon in Srila Prabhupada's life. Very instrumental personality. Bhakti Vilas Maharaj. Bhakti Madhav Goswami Maharaj. Such great personalities, and they were all coming as disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Okay? Now bear in mind, I haven't mentioned Prabhupada yet. I'll come to that. Glorious Godbrothers. Srila Prabhupada had an amazing relationship with many of them, actually. In fact, it's said that even after Srila Prabhupada, years later, when he was himself an established Acharya, developing the Krishna conscious movement all around the world, you know, when you'd come and visit back to in India with these disciples, he would actually spend time with some of his godbrothers, like Bhakti, some of these disciples like Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj and so on and so forth. And it's said that when he would talk to them, it's as if everything else in the world had stopped. It was just him and his friend. You know when you've got like a really close friend, where you're talking to them and everything else externally doesn't matter anymore. Like the whole world has stopped. It's just you and that friend. You're completely in the zone. And it said that, and we don't know actually what they were talking about. Some must be some intimate gatha. And Prabhupada would be actually like literally slapping his thigh, you know, out of joy. You know how Indians do that, right? They slap their thigh and like, having a great time, like talking to their... Obviously, Prabhupada is beyond being just an Indian. He's a transcendental personality. But, but the point is that, he would have these wonderful gatha with him. And he was always very, very fond of his dear godbrothers, who were also very big contributors to this movement. Okay, so I've talked about Prabhupada's godbrothers. I've talked about Srila Prabhupada's guru. Let's talk about a bit about the predictions surrounding Srila Prabhupada. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, this is 500 years ago, Prithivete ache joto nagaradi gram, sharvatto prochar hoibe mora nam. This is in old style Bengali. So he's saying, in the world, as many towns and villages there are, in each of those villages, my names will spread, right? And we can see that slowly happening now, right? The Krishna conscious movement is growing. It's even growing on social media. Can you believe it? We've got a presence on like Instagram and like, I'm not on social media. I was going to say TikTok or something. And I was going to say Facebook, but I understand Facebook is going out of fashion now, right? It's like the young people don't even look at Facebook anymore. But do you get what I'm saying? Like Krishna conscious movement is going through all different sort of ways, Jay Shetty, right? Sold out in the recently, right? Shows Krishna consciousness. Keshav Maharaj, Keshav Swami, he's now growing as well in his Instagram. You can see how what's happening back in the day is starting to like slowly develop now in the modern age. Also, it's said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita prediction, one of our ancient scriptures, deep scriptures, Mora senapati bhakti jaibe tathai, jodi papa dharmochari dur deshe jai. Right? Mora senapati bhakti jaibe tathai, jodi papa dharma. So, Mahaprabhu predicted that when the people of Kali Yuga will be going astray, and will be basically going away from the path of spirituality and of dharma and all these kind of things and running here and there, then I will send my chief, Mora Senapati, Bhakti Jabe Tathai, right? I will send my chief devotee to bring them back to me and rescue them. This is Mahaprabhu made this prediction 500 years ago, right? And it doesn't take a genius to see who this personality is. There are other predictions that also came. In fact, I'll share another one here. This is interesting. This is going way back. We're talking timeless prediction here. This is from Bhakti Devi. Do you remember this morning in the coach, we sang the Tulsi Arti, right? And I mentioned how Tulsi Arti is an eternal associate of Krishna in Vrinda. Vrinda's Van, it's Vrinda Devi's forest. She made a prediction in the Padma Purana, which is an ancient scripture, Vedic scripture. Idam stanam parityaja videsham gamyate maya, right? Idam stanam, so giving up the land of parityaj means to give up, right? Idam stanam means land. Of giving up the land of Vrindavan, very soon I'll be carried overseas to the Western world, right? It's interesting. She doesn't say, aham stanam parityana, I will go to the Western world, but instead I will be carried to the Western world. That means she's alluding to the fact that someone in the future is going to take me and make me present in the Western world, and my worship will continue. Which is interesting because Bhakti Devi's worship is carried on in every single ISKCON institution and in the homes of millions of people who practice Vaishnavism, right? So the predictions are already put in place. Now, let's go forward now to the year 1896. 1896 is an interesting year. This is the very year when Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a book. It could have potentially been the first English Vaishnava book called Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts. And he then sent it to Canada. I think it's called the Macmillan University or something like that.
Yes, Macmillan University,
Montreal University. Right, he sent it there for the first time. And that same year, a great Vaishnav, householder devotee in Kolkata called Gaur Mohan there, and his dear wife gave birth to a beautiful young child who they named Abhay, the fearless one. Now again, let's look at it's not a coincidence that the very year when Bhaktivinoda Thakur decided to push the Krishna conscious movement abroad is the very year where this great personality takes birth. Remember that when it comes to very highly elevated spiritual personalities, their births are never like just random. There's always some numerological, astrological significance as to when it happened and what was going on at the same time when this took place. Right? Is everyone with me, by the way? Yeah? Okay, great. Okay, so he was born, and you could see that the Sankirtan explosion pretty much started from 1896, the worldwide, right? Already it was developing within India, right? But worldwide it started with this book going out, and then this great personality being born in the same year. So that's a key year here. So, young Abhay, he was growing up as the years progressed, and every day, because his dad was a very pious Vaishnav, and he would take him by his hand and cross the road to go to the Radha Govinda temple in Kolkata, where he would actually daily pray and things like that. And, at 5 years old, even at that age, he had such an attraction for Krishna and also for Lord Jagannath. So 5 years old, he decided to set up the neighborhood Jagannath Rath Yatra. And he'd actually go to all the Matajis and say to them, please, give kachoris to, Lord Jagannath. And so all the Matajis, they would actually nickname him Kachori Nandu, right? His nickname was Nandu because he was born, this is another thing as well, just to show the auspiciousness. He was born on Nandu Mahotsava, right? So Prabhupada was actually born on the appearance day of Nanda Maharaj, right? So he's born on that day, so he's known as Nandu anyway. And on top of that, because to be honest, Prabhupada should also confess that he liked kachoris himself, right? So that's how all the ladies in the neighborhood would call him Kachori Nandu, right? And out of affection, they would give all these kachoris to him and things like that. And like this, so there was already great signs that he was going to be an amazing personality. He did his first, I'm really racing through this, by the way. A lot of other things happened, by the way, but just for time's sake. Anyway, but you can see the first glimmers of his bhakti, his devotion coming through. Later on, many, many years later, decades later, he actually told one of his disciples, eminent disciples, His Holiness Hridayananda Das Goswami Maharaj, still one of our big sannyasis in our movement, that, what I'm doing now, I've always been doing. This has always been my life. So bhakti has always infused his life from the day he was born. He was also very humble as well. He was also, even later on, when Srila Prabhupada was developing this movement and carried it, like around the world. Like I said, he went around the world like how many times? I think 14 times, 108 temples, over 80 bodies of works of literature, had like 5,000 disciples, and, tremendous achievements, and all at an advanced age. And, his disciples actually say to him that, how do you feel about achieving so much, perfectly fulfilling your Guru Maharaj's order? And you know what Srila Prabhupada said? He says that my Guru Maharaj was a way better preacher than I am. You shouldn't be comparing to me to my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisanta Saraswati Thakur. Because he said that my Guru Maharaj preached and developed 64 mutts in India. I couldn't even manage more than 3 centers, right? And my Guru Maharaj had way less facilities than I did, right? And he did what he did. I've got planes. I've got, all this new technology and things like computers and telephones and all that kind of stuff, and I managed to do this, and I managed to do it outside. I couldn't even do anything within India. So please don't compare me to my Guru Maharaj. He did so much more than me. Now, of course, we know that Srila Prabhupada did amazing, but it just shows that even as an advanced Vaishnava Acharya, he had so much humility that he didn't want to take any credit for himself as well. I remember actually, Krishna Kshetra Maharaj, he once gave a seminar on Srila Prabhupada, and he said that, it's a testament to Prabhupada's quality that, even now, a lot of people around the world know about the Hare Krishna movement. They know about Krishna consciousness. Very few people know about Srila Prabhupada, unless you're an ISKCON devotee. Most people outside, if you ask a random, we know this because when we do book distribution, right? You've heard of Krishna, it's like, some random English guy on the street. It's like, yeah, I've heard of Krishna, right? If you then tell them, have you heard of Prabhupada? It's like, no. Now, we might think, oh, that's a shame, we should all know about Prabhupada. But actually, that's Prabhupada's refinement, that he did not let this movement become a personality of cult around him. He didn't allow that to happen. He focused it completely on Krishna. That is incredible. Because we see that sometimes it becomes about me, about, I did this. But he always focused it on, So, like this, Srila Prabhupada, he was very humble. At the same time, he was very authoritative as well. When one of his disciples actually was asking, like, oh, Prabhupada, you know what? He was translating his books. And he said that, I've noticed here, it says Shri Shri, like, Radha Krishna or something, some name, right? He goes, Prabhupada, in English, we wouldn't put that. It wouldn't be like Mr. or about, if the word is Shri. So maybe should I just be Shri and just one Shri? And Prabhupada said, no. You edit what is in your language. Don't mess with my language. I know how it should be. Shri Shri is there for a reason. And obviously it's right because it's Shri Radha and then Shri Krishna. Right? So he was quite authoritative as well when he needed to be as well. Like, he was kind, he was humble, but he was also very fixed that what needs to be done properly needs to be done. Okay. So then carrying on with the prediction, we obviously know that in the future, Srila Prabhupada will go to the West. And again, his mood of compassion was there as well from the beginning, because when he went to the West, does anyone know which part of America he started preaching in? Boston, he kind of stepped into, yes. But then where did his thing? New York. Okay. What part of New York? Yes.
Butler, Pennsylvania is the first place he started.
Butler, Pennsylvania, yes, Sally Agarwal and them lot. But then his preaching really started to gain traction in Bowery, right, in New York. For those of you who don't know Bowery, it's a ghetto. It was a ghetto then. I think it's more gentrified now.
It's still a ghetto.
It's still a ghetto. Okay, we have an American amongst us, yes. So it still is a ghetto. And you don't understand like what it took for someone of his status to go to a place where you've got drug addicts, drunkards, homeless people, criminals. It was a very low class area, and for him to just be amongst them and preach them when he himself, he's born from very refined Vaishnava family. He had a very good education. He had such spiritual practice. He spent 9 years in Samadhi in Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan before going to the West. He didn't need to do that, but he did it anyway out of compassion. The example is given just like Lord Nityananda, when Mahaprabhu told Lord Nityananda, you know, in the olden days, that you go and preach. It said that Lord Nityananda would go to the most degraded parts of Bengal and preach to those people that are so low in values that they would even take the jewelry and steal the jewelry from their mothers that their mothers were given on their wedding days and sell it for money. And he would actually give the holy names to people like that. So you can see here, there's like, you know, the mood of compassion that he had. So Prabhupada, he had that. And it wasn't a coincidence that he went to the West either, because it was needed. He was at the right person, but it wasn't also like, oh yeah, no one else did it, so he did it. No, he was empowered to do it. Krishna Shakti bina nahi tara pravartan. One cannot propagate this movement unless you're empowered by Krishna. And he was empowered to do this. Okay. It's interesting as well, when one looks back that at 5 years old, he did his Rath Yatra. And then later on in 1975, he would have one of the biggest Rath Yatras in San Francisco. You know, and he would look back on the time when he did a Rath Yatra back when he was, 5 years old. Okay, let's move on a bit. So we talked about Prabhupada being born in 1896. He grew up, and then...
I want to mention something to clarify more about. In 1996, Bhaktivinoda Thakur took Jagannath Das Babaji, the palanquin, and they discovered the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Yogapi.
Okay, amazing.
Extra.
So not only was he born on Nanda Mahatsava, not only was he born in the same year when Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent that manuscript, the Western manuscript of Mahaprabhu, to Montreal University, it was also, as Prabhuji mentioned, the year when Jagannath Das Babaji, at Bhaktivinoda Thakur's behest, discovered the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
He would jump from his basket.
Yes.
He would jump, Dora.
He jumped and he goes, Eito Janmasthan. You know, he said Mahaprabhu's Janmasthan.
He couldn't walk. He was blind and walked. Couldn't walk.
Yeah, that absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. So what happens? Gaur Mohan there wanted Srila Prabhupada, a young Abhay at that time, to not just have Vaishnava values, but also to be materially skilled and, you know, equipped to deal with the material world. So he enlisted him in one of the poshest schools at that time, called Scottish Churches College, right? Which is like you could say it's like kind of like an Oxford University or like an Imperial College or something like that, very good quality university. And growing up, he whilst he still had that Vaishnava core to him, he obviously got caught up in the Indian independence movement. So everyone here has heard of like Gandhi, right? The Gandhian movement, obviously, right? And he became a Gandhian, right? He was very much into freeing India from British colonial rule. And that actually became his focus, actually. He became a political activist, to the point where his father would invite sadhus to the house, but he would be skeptical of them because he's seen so many of these fake sadhus in his life, fake spiritual leaders that really want to just say good stuff, but want to just, fleece you for your money and things like that. But anyway, what happened was then in 1921, Srila Prabhupada at this time was 25 years old. At that time, Bhakti Santa Saraswati Thakur Maharaj came to visit Kolkata, right? So Bhaktivinoda Maharaj, remember, he's Prabhupada's guru. He was already a big acharya by that time, established lots of mats everywhere. So, he's going around preaching everywhere. He came to Kolkata, and Prabhupada's friend encouraged him that, look, there's this great Swamiji's come here. Why don't we come and go visit him? Prabhupada is reluctant. He's like, look, I'm sorry, I don't really value these sadhus. I know my dad invites them to the houses and things like that, but let's be honest, I'm not into it. But Prabhupada this friend, I think his name was Narayan, actually convinced him that, no, come on. So he kind of twisted his hand, and so then Abhay said, okay, fine, let's go and see this sadhu. But he didn't have much hopes of what's going to happen from this interaction. So he went there. He met Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj for the first time, and the experience blew him away. He was astonished. More than anything, he was even astonished by the way Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj spoke. He spoke such high-class Bengali. Now Prabhupada, being a Bengali himself in Kolkata, educated, even he couldn't understand the Bengali that he's speaking because it's so posh, right? And on top of that, then he would switch to English. And it said that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's English was so erudite that even the English governors and officials at that time could not fully comprehend what he's talking because it's such high level, high class English. I'll be honest with you, if anyone ever gets a hold of reading Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's books, you'll need a thesaurus next to you. I can, because we have like some of his books in our records, like his commentary on the Brahma Samhita and things like that. You need a book just to understand what he's talking about, right? It's
you need to read 10 times.
Huh?
You need to read 10 times.
Yeah, easily,
After
easily.
10 times, you can.
Yeah. So, anyway, but he was at the same time very impressed by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and he was like thinking, wow, this, you know, he was very impressed also by the spiritual things that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was talking about. But then Prabhupada, I guess you could say, play devil's advocate. He said that, you know, you're talking about all these spiritual things, but right now, don't you think it's more important for the country to free itself before we can start looking at, you know, going to Krishna and connecting back with Krishna and things like that and becoming spiritually enlightened? We have more pressing issues here. We're under occupation by the British. That's the more important thing. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj then gave the example actually. So from the Mahabharata, everyone's heard of Mahabharata, right? There's a conversation between Yudhishthir Maharaj in the forest with a personality is basically a crane, a buck, you know, buck bird, right? Actually, it's Yamaraj in disguise in the forest. Some of you might know this pastime where, you know, they're having this conversation, Yaksha Prashna, right? And in this, buck asks Yudhishthir Maharaj, so what's the news? What's new? And Yudhishthir Maharaj's reply was brilliant. He goes, nothing new. What do you mean, what's new? There's nothing new, right? So then Yudhishthir Maharaj elaborates. He goes, we're all here in the frying pan of Maya, right? And we've got this ladle that's turning us around, and each time it's turning, our days are going, our nights are going, the months are going, the years are going, and we're just getting fried more and more. Just like that. The temperature is high, and all the living beings are getting cooked. Evidently, I think Bhakt was very impressed by that, right? And then Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj then says to Prabhupada, so when the living entities in this world are getting cooked, what's better? Toss them over so that the other side gets cooked? Or reach in and take the things out, take the living entities out of the pan? So then Prabhupada, evidently, his answer was obviously reach in and take them out of the frying pan. Why, you know, toss them one over another? And then Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, this is the difference between national independence and spiritual independence. One day you're under British rule, next day you are ruling the British, next day someone is ruling someone else. This is the way the world goes. Everyone's getting cooked, whichever way you look at it. But if you really want to give people true independence, then you release them from the cycle of birth and death and connect them back with Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Anyway, so this conversation, it basically triggered the revelation in Prabhupada's, you could say, in mentality. He was convinced of the compassion. He realized that, you know what this great Swami is saying is not just overthrowing the British, but is delivering us out of Maya Shakti, and into Bhakti Shakti. So then, from that point onwards, the relationship between Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada started. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj then says to Prabhupada, you take up preaching. You take up preaching. You're an educated man. You've been to Scottish Churches College. You can speak good English. Preach. Preach to the Western man, not just in India, right? Okay, so then the years roll on. So now we're going to fast forward a bit. 11 years later, so that was 1921. 11 years later, 1932.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
1922, sure. 1922, he met his Guru Maharaj in 1922.
Oh, 22, okay.
Sure. 2022.
Okay.
22.
You sure, yeah, Prabhu?
Sure, I'll come.
Okay.
Yeah, 1922.
22, okay, fine, no, sorry. 1932 then.
1933.
33.
Sorry, I'm getting the dates mixed up then. Sorry, okay.
Diksha, 1933.
I know it was, there was 11 years, 11 years, yes,
22
yes.
to
Okay,
33,
no
11
problem. 1933, he takes Diksha. So it took, from the moment he met Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj to the point where he took initiation, it was 11 years.
Yeah.
And he took Diksha from him in Prayag. At this point, he was initiated, he was already, with the name Abhay, and Bhaktivedanta Maharaj also added Abhay Charanavinda Das Adhikari, right? That was his initiated name. And so that from that point onwards, and Srila Prabhupada obviously would continue the relationship. He met Bhaktivedanta Maharaj whenever he could over the years. I know one of the questions that came up in the tour was, what, did Srila Prabhupada get married? Right? I think someone asked that. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So that's another thing you have to understand, that to be spiritually advanced, you can be spiritually advanced in any ashram that you belong to. Whether you're brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyas. Right? Prabhupada will be a sannyas later on. But initially, he did become a grihastha. Even as a grihastha, he practiced nicely his Krishna conscious lifestyle. And he met Bhaktivedanta Maharaj's guru whenever he could. One time they were in Radhakund. And Bhaktivedanta Maharaj told him, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Bhaktivedanta Maharaj left in 1937.
Yes, 1st of January.
Okay, 1st of January, 1937. So, before that, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj then says to Srila Prabhupada in Radhakund that very soon, I'm going to leave. And there will be a great fire. He says in Bengali, Agun Lagbe, right? There'll be a big fire in the mat. Not literal fire, but how can I put it? A social fire, right? There'll be a fire, and generally what happens is and you see this throughout history, when great personalities leave, there's a bit of, like a bit of instability, or what's going to happen. Just like in a family, when you've got like a leader of the family, like the father leaves, and then, the kids are left with all the assets, and then you know how it is, they start fighting over the properties and stuff like that, right? So, similar thing, but just on a much bigger scale, right? So Prabhupada, so he said to him that, but then Bhaktivedanta Maharaj said the key thing to him, there'll be a great fire, there'll be commotion. If you ever get money, print books, right? Sell the walls if you need to. Sell the buildings, but just keep the knowledge going. Keep the education going, the spiritual education. That means the books. The books is the most important thing, right? Books are the basis, right? That's one of our famous sayings. So Prabhupada heard these simple instructions. In fact, we can break them down into 3 ways. Number 1, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj told him, you are educated in English, so spread to the whole world. Number 2, if you ever get money, print books. So books meaning physical books, but we can also understand it means Harikatha, because Prabhupada engaged in a lot of Harikatha, which we're also encouraged to do. Number 3, Prabhupada then also took inspiration. This is one of the very key verses that Prabhupada is always inspired by, was Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 41. Vyavasaitmaka buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Right? Having that one pointed resolve in fulfilling his Guru Maharaj's instructions. This is like the potent ingredient that helped him to actually push this movement forward. In fact, this is the secret in our spiritual life, is by following the instructions of the Guru and fulfilling them. This will help us to develop our own personal enlightenment in connecting with Krishna as well. So then what happened was okay, now we're going to fast forward a bit. 1941. I hope I'm saying the right year. Maybe.
44.
No. What it is?
No, DTG.
No, the Keshav Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti. You know okay, so he met with Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Swami Maharaj and Narasimhananda Maharaj. Basically, Narasimhananda Das Brahmachari. These are 2 of his Godbrothers, disciples of Bhaktivedanta Maharaj. Prabhupada himself was around 45 years old now, so the years are rolling on. Remember, he's still got his practice. So he's a family man, he's married, he's got kids, he's got a pharmacy. As of now, the pharmacy is going very successfully as well, right? But it's at the same time, they formed this committee called the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, which is, to distribute Vaishnav publications, articles, knowledge, things like that. And it was evident at that time that even as a householder, Abhay Charanavinda Prabhu was so scholarly and so full of knowledge that his fellow Godbrothers, they bestowed on him the name Bhakti Vedanta. right? So Bhaktivedanta actually, you know that his name Bhaktivedanta, he actually came from them. And it's interesting, this name usually goes to Swamiji's, right? But Prabhupada was a householder, but they recognized his gift and his scholarship so much that they said that, you know what, you are nothing other than a Bhaktivedanta, so therefore this is the name you should have. So Prabhupada, in all humility, he accepted it as well. And at the same time, he was carrying with his household life. But I guess at this time, you could say that there was also a bit of a change happening. Because up until now, he was able to manage his household life, his business, and his spiritual life very nicely. But now the pull of dedicating himself fully in a kind of, you could say, renounced manner in Krishna consciousness was pulling at him. But he didn't know what to do. In fact, he was at that time, he actually looked at the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it said here that when Krishna especially favors someone, I start taking away their health, their wealth, their position, their prestige. I start taking away everything. Who could handle that right now? Hands up, who could handle if Krishna starts taking away everything you've got? No. no, thank you. Right? So it's interesting, right? And actually said that when I especially favor someone, I think this is coming from Bilva Mangal Thakur, right? Great personality from the olden days. Prabhupada read this and he thought, oh, no. I mean, I don't know what he said in Bengali. Are Baba, this is very difficult, right? He actually thought to himself that, look, I like Krishna, but I like Krishna in his form of giving, not his form of taking away from me. I'm not strong enough to deal with that, right? Obviously, what he didn't realize was that at that time, but what Krishna gives in return is very rare, which is his personal association. But remember, you have to remember Prabhupada's mindset at the time. He's a householder. He's not ready for that. He's not ready for like just taking everything. Anyway, but then what happened? That's exactly what Krishna starts doing. He went from being very successful, family man, business and everything, then gradually realized that the chinks started appearing in his business. He started to finding it harder to build up the money to maintain his family, his businesses, and they started to fail, right? Now you might think externally, oh no, why would Krishna do this? But you have to understand that don't judge these examples on a material level. They're on a spiritual level. Sometimes, you know, when like someone's really into spiritual life, then Krishna would deliberately pull the rug out from their feet. Look at the Pandavas. Look at Kunti Devi. Look at Jai Shri Radha Govinda Madhav ki. Jai Krishna Balaram ki. Jai Shri Gaur Nitai ki. So so what happened? Prabhupada's life started to change, you know. In fact, it came to the point where he was having to like really struggle to maintain his family, and also the relationship with his wife was also becoming distant. His wife, Prabhupada does actually reflect later in life that his wife was a good wife. There's no doubt about that. You know, he actually says that my wife was a good wife, and it wasn't easy for her being my wife because of the mission that I was bestowed with, you know. And sometimes we find with great personalities, even on a spiritual level and even on a material level, if you look at life stories of great personalities, you find that their partners or their loved ones have to make a sacrifice. Now it's difficult, it is difficult, but understand this though, that those loved ones, the sacrifice that they make will also be to their eternal benefit, even though they may not always see it at that time, right? So Prabhupada does actually give credit. He says in the conversation to his disciples later on, but at that time, his wife was drifting away mentally from him. And one day, so they didn't have enough tea in the house, right? I'm sure some of you may have heard of this pastime.
Tea and cookies.
Right? Yeah.
And cookies.
Yeah, oh, tea and cookies, right.
Biscuits.
Biscuit, yeah. Right? Biscuits. So basically, Prabhupada's wife, she's thinking, I need to get some tea, biscuits, things like that. Yeah, and then parleji, right? And so do you know what she did? She took Prabhupada's manuscript of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like imagine this is like a big sacred scripture. Takes to the shops and exchanges it for tea and biscuits and brings it back. And it's interesting because Prabhupada's reflecting afterwards when he came back home after a hard day's work, and he's looking as like, yo, where's my Bhagavatam gone? Like, where's my Bhagavatam, you know? And then he found out that his wife exchanged it, and he's like, okay, this is not good. this is not good. But then he started smiling and he realized, okay, it's happening. It's happening. You know, like Krishna's, this is something Krishna's doing. Maybe this is Krishna's mercy. He actually says to the wife that, look, let's be clear then here, okay? You have to make a choice. You have to make a choice. Either the tea or me. Because the Bhagavatam is basically him, innit? Like, the Bhagavatam is his life, right? And the wife said, I will happily take the tea. So yeah, and then basically Prabhupada was like, he was heartbroken, obviously. He was heartbroken. We laugh about it now, but he was heartbroken. And it's interesting, actually. He's reflected, and again, this is something he shared with his disciples later on in years to come, that when he was due to get married, he had choice between two girls. The wife that he got married to and another girl.
He likes the second one.
Yeah, he liked the other girl more. Just really preferred the other girl. It was his father, Gaur Mohan, there that said to him that no, go with this one, because when the time comes, it will be easier for you to get out. Right? So like his father's like, you know, next level, like thinking on some high level devotional strategy here. You know, like, okay, you know, long-term planning here, you know. It's like, no. My goal for you, son, is to get out of this material world. So this lady's not going to be good for you in that respect. She will be, okay? So anyway, but yeah, I mean, what can we say, you know? But Prabhupada, yeah, he had nothing by that time, right? So whatever left, he basically had a small case of cloth for himself, left with nothing else, and went to Mathura. Right? Basically, his family life had finished now. He went to Mathura. He boarded in a place called Bengali Ghat. It's like in Dharamsala. Like a Dharamsala. It's like a lodging house. It's called in Bengali, in a place called Bengali Ghat. Family abandoned him. He's dejected. He's, I guess, disappointed. Yeah, his family pretty much kind of like, you know, finished their bridges with him and things like that. And he was there, basically living like a mendicant, you know. One day, okay, now we're forwarding now, 1957, a disciple of Prabhupada's godbrother, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. Now remember I mentioned Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj is one of Bhaktivedanta Maharaj's twinkling stars, right? Great godbrother. His disciple saw Srila Prabhupada in this place. Prabhupada was now 61 years old, right? And he said to him, Are, Abhay Babu, it's you. What are you doing here? You know, you're a scholar. You're like a Bhaktivedanta. What are you doing living like a mendicant here in, like, you know, Bengali Ghat in Mathura, you know? And then Srila Prabhupada said, no, I'm here. I'm in this Dharamsala. Everything's, you know, he was honest. He just said, look, my life is finished in what it was before. So now what else do? I just turn to Krishna and be here, live my days here, you know. But you know, the disciple, he was like, no, not with you, Bhaktivedanta. You can't just stay here like this. He took his bag and took his hand and he said, come with me. And he took him to Keshav Gaudiya Math. This is the math that was being run by Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. He brought him there. He said, look, you know, no home, no family, no business, no money, nothing like that. And on top of that, imagine this, right? You've got nothing in your life. Every family structure you can think of is gone. And on top of that, you've also got the pressure of the instructions that your Guru Maharaj has given you, which is preach to the Western people, and if you get money, print books. And on top of that, he's 61 years old at this time with nothing, and he's expected to, like, you know, fulfill this mission. That's a lot of pressure for someone to deal with, you know. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Anyway, disciple brought him to Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. Keshav Maharaj obviously was really happy to see him. That's Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, that is, in case we get confused with our modern day Keshav Maharaj, obviously, right? And the disciple, as you know, they both were discussing, and the disciple actually just said to Maharaj that, why don't you just give Bhaktivedanta sannyas? You know, just give him sannyas. It's perfect. Bhakti, Prabhupada at that time was reluctant. He's like, oh my God, I don't know, man. You know, I mean, you know, sannyas. I'm going to take sannyas here. At that time, it's interesting. Some of you may have seen this picture. I'll explain it. This picture will make more sense now. At that time, there was another devotee there very old devotee, 91 years old. His name was Sanatan Prabhu, right? He was one of the, you've seen a lot of temples, like the old, long-term senior brahmacharis. They're basically like vanaprasthas. Like, like most temples have it, right? Like these senior, they've been in the temple for like many, many years. They're practically like vanaprastha, but they're brahmacharis. Like in our temple, we've got like Prajana Prabhu and, Srinivas Prabhu, like such kind of personalities. So there was this Prabhuji there. Prabhupada said that, okay, and because Prabhupada said this because he didn't think this would happen, right? He said that, okay, look, I'll take sannyas if Sanatan Prabhu also takes sannyas, right? Because he's thinking that Sanatan Prabhu is not going to take sannyas. He's happy being in the brahmachari ashram. He will live out his days as a brahmachari. It's all good. Sanatan Prabhu, 91 years old, he gets up from his chair, goes, I'll take sannyas tomorrow. And so Prabhupada's like, oh my God, like, wow, okay. And at that time, he saw this as a sign. That means, look, if this happened, that means there's a reason that I'm here now, and that life has pushed me in this direction. So then...
But Siddhanta appeared in a dream, pushing, you have to take sannyas now.
Yeah. Twice, yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
It's interesting. But Siddhanta appeared in his dream.
Yes, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj appeared him in the dream and told, I think initially Prabhupada was like, he wasn't going to do it because he wanted to defer it. Also, when Bhaktivedanta Maharaj initially told him as well, he was in the thick of it in terms of family responsibilities and things like that. So he's like, I can't think of sannyas, I'm a full-on family man, I've got kids, I've got business, this is like, whoa, yeah.
What is sannyas fully involved?
Oh, right, okay, good question. Sannyas means renunciant. So there are 4 ashrams. One is brahmachari, which is student life, where you're practicing like a student, as a monk, a fully celibate lifestyle, and you generally live in a monastery, like an ashram. Those were long-term ashram. You see when you come to the manor, you see those devotees in saffron. That means they've committed themselves long time to the brahmachari lifestyle. But you can also get brahmacharis in white as well, right? Like Sankirtan Prabhu is a brahmachari, even though he's in white. But but the main thing is they're living in an ashram, living a celibate student lifestyle, and preaching and things like that. Then you got grihastha. Grihastha means that you are Krishna conscious, practicing Krishna consciousness, also preaching and things, but living outside with a family, kids, house, all that kind of stuff, which is majority of the movement right now. Most devotees are grihasthas, right? 95%. I think, yeah, all of us, I think, barring probably like a handful here, I think all of us would class as grihasthas. Then you've got vanaprasthas. This is like, you met Gopaswami Prabhu today and his good wife. So this is where they've done the grihastha life, they've done the whole family responsibilities and things like that. Now they want to focus more on just being in a spirit like Krishna consciousness without any family responsibilities and stuff like that. So with vanaprastha, they either live together as a couple, but not like with the same level of affection that a normal grihastha would have. It's slightly more detached. Or the husband and wife even live separately. Now, sannyas is where a person completely gives up every single family attachment, and they've basically dedicated themselves fully to traveling and preaching. They take on the sannyas robes, like like in a manner we've got Kesha Swami, Dayananda Swami. They're generally also referred to as swamis in many cases, right? And they have a danda, like a stick, which is 3 sticks together, which is basically their thoughts, words, and deeds dedicated towards Krishna. No family, no safety net. The only safety net that has Krishna. No home, no bank balance, nothing. They just travel as literally like just from place to place. That's the life of a sannyas. They don't go back to their family life ever. That's it. That's their life now. Complete renunciation, complete cutting off from the material attachments so they can focus on bringing Krishna to the whole world. They basically cutting off their attachment to their family so they can make the whole world their family.
And they don't speak to their family anymore.
Traditionally, no. I say traditionally. Some sannyasis may take leverage in case they want to keep contact with the family for preaching purposes, but generally speaking, no, they wouldn't. No. Yeah. I mean, we can see that in Srila Prabhupada's case, that's pretty much how it was. And That's how it's meant to be, yeah. So, okay. So then on the day of, okay, this is interesting. On the day of Vishwarupa Mahotsava. So Vishwarupa is, for those of you who don't know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's brother, right? You know Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He had an older brother called Vishwarupa who also took sannyas, right? So on that day, Srila Prabhupada then took sannyas from Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Swami Maharaj. And along with him, so now what's happened is that he took sannyas and he became Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Yeah, Abhay Charanavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Okay, I haven't included Prabhupada yet, Alex, because Prabhupada will come later, right? AC means Abhay Charanavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Abhay Charanavinda was already his name before, right? Abhay was his name. Then Bhaktivedanta Maharaj gave him Charanavinda, right? Then his Godbrothers gave him Bhaktivedanta, and then Pragyan Keshav Maharaj gave him Swami. So now when you think of his name, you know, sometimes when you hear the prayers, you know, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Ki Jai, why, you know, you think, why, what's all these names and stuff? Now you realize where they all came from, right? And then, and his, you know, the Sanatan Prabhu, he became Bhaktivedanta Muni Maharaj. So now, I don't know if some of you may have seen this. You know, have you seen the picture where you've got, and this is it's actually in a room in the Radha Damodar temple. There's a picture of them, all three of them together in a black and white picture where they're taking sannyas, right? So you see the personality that's seated there, right? That's Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Swami Maharaj.
Sit down. Bhakti Pragyan sit on a chair.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The one who's seated.
And other than stand up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, the one who's seated is Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Swami Maharaj, and then the two that are standing is
standing.
Yeah, Muni Maharaj standing and Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj is standing.
Similar to Bhaktivedanta Manor in his rooms. In the sleeping
Yeah.
room.
Oh yeah, Bhaktivedanta Manor.
Yeah,
The man
they,
upstairs in the sleeping room, but bedroom. The pictures were there on the fireplace.
no, he's saying that the picture that I'm referring to, it's in the manor.
Manor, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
No, there's a picture upstairs in the room as well, a black and white picture.
Oh, here.
You see Bhaktivedanta.
That's different.
That's, yeah.
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 Bhaktivedanta.
Okay, so I'm just going to finish up now because I've got like 15 minutes here. So anyway, but I think we've now you get a bit more idea about the sort of background behind Srila Prabhupada, right? Okay, so then what happened is, so they were there, they took sannyas, and it said that, afterwards, when they were having like prasadam together, and there was a little boy that served them chapatis, and he was saying, oh, do you want some more, and then running away. And then the Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj was joking with Srila Prabhupada, saying that, this boy, he's probably just seeing us as two old men needing chapatis and things. But what he doesn't realize is, the future of the whole Gaudiya movement is in our hands now. Because remember, by this time, you remember when we mentioned how Bhaktivedanta Maharaj told Prabhupada that when I leave, there's going to be like some craziness going on, there'll be factions developing. One thing you have to realize is this, look, we're in a spiritual movement, and we're here to elevate ourselves and connect to Krishna. But let's be very clear that even in a spiritual movement, we're still in the material world. So things like quarrels and politics and this and that, it will happen because any organization will have these things. That should not detract you from the spiritual essence of what you're here for. Just like when you go to a hospital, you're there to get treated. So in a hospital, you might have things kicking off. Actually, it literally happened the other day. I was in a hospital, I had an accident. And when there was some like woman just proper mouthing off at the nurses, like, no, I don't want to do this, I was thought she's going to fight the nurses or something, So you'll see a lot of things happening in the hospitals, isn't it? But you know that your purpose being in the hospital is to get treated and get better and come out. So for us as well, some of you have been in the movement for a long time, some of you are relatively new. I'm just telling you right now, just be prepared that these things happen. Don't get fazed by it. You carry your focus on what you're here for, which is to spiritually connect with Srila Prabhupada and obviously Krishna, Radha Krishna and Mahaprabhu, right? So anyway, this will happen. But then so they were sitting there and Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj was laughing and joking, saying, look, it's in our hands now. And so these chapatis, and then he actually says to Prabhupada, eat up. We need our nourishment. We've got a big mission ahead of us, you know. So and then they laughed and they took, and it's actually in one sense it's true because Prabhupada did have a massive mission coming up ahead of him. Yeah, okay, so then what happened was, and it's actually said at that point that, you know, when the kid served in the chapatis, Prabhupada made a point of always keeping candy in his pocket because then, you know, kids love candy. So kids would always know that, oh, if I go to the Radha Damodar temple, I'll get candy. Then what will happen is the parents will know about it, so they'll come as well. And then through that, Prabhupada can preach to them and explain to them about Krishna consciousness, things like that. So, you know, he had his tactic there as well. Anyway, time went on. He was carrying on in Radha Damodar temple. Remember, at that time, Radha Damodar temple was not like this. For those of you who've been there now, you know, now it's like a beautiful temple, beautiful, like, you know, so many people. It's a big, busy, bustling temple. It's like, you know, like how Manor is like, you know, this really busy, bustling place where people are coming. It's like, you know, pilgrims are coming, thousands. That's what Radha Damodar temple is like, probably even more so. At that time, it wasn't like that, right? That happened because of Srila Prabhupada, right? But at the time, he was still unknown as this great personality. So it was quite a muddy place. It was broken. Prabhupada only requested for 2 rooms. One for him to sleep in and do his bhajan. Bhajan means his personal practices and things like that. And another for him to cook in as well. And he also requested that from one of the rooms, he can get a direct view of Rupa Goswami's Samadhi. So I mentioned at the beginning of the session about the 6 Goswamis. The leader of the 6 Goswamis is Rupa Goswami. And his Samadhi means that his place where he was buried. And they construct a structure over it. So he could have that as a source of inspiration. Rupa Goswami ended up also appearing to him in a divine revelation to tell him that you now must continue with the mission. You know, to go and preach. Paschatya Deshatarine, right? This is a divine revelation because Rupa Goswami was existing 500 years ago, like, you know, appearing. So it came to him. But yeah, he was there and he would, it's interesting, he was already starting to prepare himself for the mission ahead to go to the West, right? He's never actually been to the West before this. He wrote a book at that time in the Mutt in English. I think apart from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, like the first next book in the Mutt in English on Vaishnavism. Now, it's interesting because I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of this book. This is the time when in the West, there was a lot of talk about moon landing and this and that, interstellar space travel and things like that. So then Srila Prabhupada wrote a book about how you need, you know, appropriate fit bodies to go in certain areas and, you know, like a different sort of dimensions and consciousness to go in certain areas. And this book was called The Easy Journey to Other Planets. Hands up who's heard of this book? Easy Journey to Other Planets. So I didn't know this before because I thought that this was after post ISKCON. Actually, no, it's pre ISKCON. It was when when Prabhupada was still part of the Mutt in, you know, Radha Damodar, right? So he wrote this book. So technically speaking, that's historical. That's the first book. If anyone asks, what's the first book Srila Prabhupada wrote? It's Easy Journey to Other Planets. So he wrote that book. And then what happens as the days went by, he started to lecture. You know, because what he'd do is in the daytime, he would also give lectures to pilgrims that would come. Now this is interesting, right? Because the pilgrims that are coming would mainly be Bengali speakers and Hindi speakers. And he started to lecture in English to them. And so then, like, you know, afterwards, like, people are like thinking, why is he like talking to us in English? Like, you know, this is India in the 60s. Like, who even, like, which Indians even could speak English then, right? They were like, and Prabhupada was fully proficient in Hindi and Bengali. He used to give lectures in both, but he started speaking in English. Later, after when Prabhupada became big and the ISKCON movement was fully established, they realized that he was practicing. Yeah, he was preparing himself because he knows that in the future, he's going to have to speak to English people, like English-speaking people. And daytime, he would do all this. He would do his sadhana, his practices, his bhajans, his worship, his preaching. And then at night, he would sweep the floor. And later on, actually, the devotees at the Radharana temple reflect, years later, that he would be crying. He'd be crying at night and be crying for empowerment, right? He would say, this is in Bengali, he would say, he wrote this actually, Bhakti nahi, Veda nahi. So, you know, his name is Bhakti Vedanta. Bhakti, Ved. Bhakti nahi means I have no devotion. Ved nahi. Ved means Vedas. I have no knowledge. Right? Ved nahi. Nan eve shattak karo. So you please empower me. Right? It's a cry to Krishna. Look, I've got this mission ahead of me. I've left my family. Right? Please, I need empowerment here. And you'd cry like this each night. You know? Anyway, and like this, as time went by, Prabhupada then eventually, I'm going to have to wrap up now, yeah. But Prabhupada eventually then, as we know, when the time came, 1965, he then made that step to, he left his own family to embrace all of us as his family. The whole world as his family. To make the whole world come to Krishna, to make us all his disciples, his children, children's children, children's children's children, you know. So I think for a lot of us who are already in the Krishna conscious movement, we can look at the sacrifices Prabhupada went through and obviously, you know, obviously really thank him for what he's done for us. Some of us may not even realize the impact he's having on us. And for those of you who are new to Krishna consciousness, at least now you can develop some appreciation for what Prabhupada's given us as you embark on your Krishna conscious journey as well, and get inspired to get into this whole thing. I'll actually share one thing. I mentioned his name was A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Now the question is, how did Prabhupada come about? Okay. Later on, when he was in the West, so okay, let's now fast forward. He's come to the West, New York, San Francisco, the world, right? London, everywhere, Paris, right? He went all over the world, right? Starting establishing places. Initially, his disciples would call him Swamiji, right? So in India, there's a suffix G that you put under someone like, Prabhuji, or Ashwinji, how are you today, Ashwinji, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Prabhupada actually said at that time, actually, this G, it's actually low class. It's very colloquial terminology that, you know, like Indians just say to each other, right? So then what happens is the disciples then asked him that, okay, well, in that case, well, tell us then, what is the most refined, cultured way of addressing you? Because that's what we want to do. And Prabhupada said, well, you know, there's Gurudev, or there's Srila Prabhupada, you know? And then they said, yeah, but that's you're also giving us choice here. Just maybe what is the one thing that we can address you by? And then Prabhupada thought for a while, and then he said, okay, go with Prabhupada. Between Gurudev and Prabhupada, go with Prabhupada. So what does Prabhupada mean? Let's break it down. Prabhu, Pada, right? Prabhu, pra, comes from Prakrishta Rupena. Prakrishta Rupena means existing in a very special, glorious way. It's actually referring to the Supreme Lord, right? Someone who exists in a very glorious, exalted manner, right? And then Bhu comes from Bhavati, which means to exist. So that person who is existing in a special, glorious way is a Prabhu. So it refers to either the Supreme Lord himself or someone who's very, very, very exalted. And then Pada or Pad means feet. So that means someone who's very exalted at the feet of someone who's even more exalted. It's like a designation, basically. So then this is the name that Prabhupada recommended. Now, sometimes people may critically think, oh, that's a bit of a high thing for Prabhupada to say about himself. Actually, no, even here, we see Prabhupada's humility. Because actually, he said that Prabhupada is good because it means that when we do our kirtans and stuff, at the end, I can also join in saying Jai Prabhupada because I can refer it to my Guru Maharaj. You know what I mean? So actually, it gave him an opportunity to glorify his own Guru Maharaj, because when everyone says Jai Prabhupada, he can also say Jai Prabhupada, but he's going to glorify his own Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, in the process. So that's how the name Srila Prabhupada came about. I'll just share one more thing. When he was in New York, 26 2nd Avenue, he established a little base called the Matchless Gifts shop front. I don't know, some of you may have been there. Yeah, it's there. It's existing to this day. And that's where he incorporated the name ISKCON. So until then, when he went to the West, when he was preaching to the people, they just saw him as this great Swamiji. They didn't know about oh, he comes from this whole, this whole background culture called a Gaudiya Vaishnavism and, Brahma, Madhva, Sampradaya and, Gaudiya Mat. They didn't know any of this. They just saw him as this great personality. And then what happens that he actually then at that time said to them that, yes, now it's time to register our movement. And his disciples were at the time thinking, why? Why do you want to register the movement? What do you mean? Firstly, who amongst us has got any money anyway, right? And is this maybe it's to help with tax benefit, to get, and he says that you've only got a handful of disciples anyway. And also, Prabhupada, why do we need you as a movement? We got you, we love you, we want you. And he says, no, because in the future, because Prabhupada is seeing in the future what this will become. When this Maxis Gift was established, it was small, like a little shop front. Like the Maxis Gift room, how big was it? Like about tiny, about like a box size, like this, from that wall to like where I'm sitting here.
These pillars to the...
Yeah, maybe this pillar or something. Tiny place. And about that much width, yeah? Tiny place. And that's where the handful of people to come and listen to him. Even then, let's be clear, that in terms of the austerities Prabhupada went through, it's not that they all came and listened. Prabhupada's preaching to a lot of disturbed people. Some would come and do crazy things and go off. There was one time when one guy tried to attack Prabhupada. His manuscript got stolen. All these things happen. It's not just a smooth ride that he went through. But still, a few decided to stay on. And that's when he brought in this Jewish lawyer called Goldsmith, Mr. Goldsmith, who then decided to get them to sign as trustees and establish, and he called it International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
Krishna consciousness. Confirmed.
Yeah. Actually, it's Aarti now, yeah? Okay,
Yep.
fine.
Aarti.
Yeah. Jai. That's how ISKCON was developed, and there's a reason behind why it's called ISKCON, but we can talk about it later, maybe in the next few days. But ISKCON movement ki Jai! Prabhupada ki Jai! Jai Shri Radha Govinda Madhav Bhagavan ki Jai Shri Krishna Balaram Bhagavan ki Jai Shri Gaur Nitai ki